Asking me to bring forth a message here. It's about it's almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Good Friday, so this will be the time in which the crucifixion was taking place. So without further discussion from me, I say a silent prayer and then he will start. Indeed, we join together at this solemn and sacred time. A time which is remembered as a time of great darkness, when the clouds darkened and the winds increased and the cold came. And I, nailed to a tree, hovered above you all. I wish to share just a very small piece of my experience of that time, a time designed to encompass all that I had learned, to incorporate and complete all that I had learned on this planet and prior to my incarnation, and to create an illustration that could be interpreted many ways, but ideally, always in a loving way. Because it was only love that motivated me to that experience. It was only love that informed the experience itself as I had it. And it was only love that transcended the experience. Now, many of you will say that it was the crucifixion that was the key act, the suffering that paid for the sins of the world. And if you say this, and if it brings you hope and lets you feel like you can be saved in a way that you cannot be otherwise, I do not mind if you say this. For things can be seen in many levels. But what I ask you to do is to love your enemies, and the belief that sin is possible is indeed an enemy. For it plagues you and puts you in situations where magical means are required for your salvation. I would reframe the experience of the crucifixion to say it was what I needed to go through in order to create the illustration that was fulfilled 2 days later. For the resurrection is the key message of the crucifixion, not the suffering on the cross. It is more what the embrace of apparent suffering will bring when you encounter it directly and willingly, when you fully breathe into your experience that the unloving thoughts have created, the thorns on the head. And so for this time, this 3 hours, and what you call your Good Friday, I look back with celebration. And I join with those who are in pain in your world at this time, you could say particularly. Because the experience I have transcended allows me a doorway, a compassion doorway, to let those who are suffering now, who are afraid and hungry and filled with dis-ease, I have been there. I know what it is like. I desired the experience that I might be able to join with you in your times of suffering, because I love you. And it is true if you look at the crucifixion and think, oh, it is an act of great love. Yes. But it was a love that I surrendered to, the Father's love operating through me, because I was scared. And as the story tells, I asked to have the cup taken from me. It was only in my surrender to the Father, because I loved the Father and the Mother, and I loved my brothers and sisters particularly. We will say that in the garden, when the great trial came upon me. It was the recognition that what I would be doing would alleviate the suffering of my brothers and sisters. That is what gave me the courage to move forward and say, nevertheless, thy will be done. And everything else was just an enactment of that will. Not a will separate from mine, you see, because I trust that the Father's will is my will. It is just that I trust the Father to know what it is better than I as a human being could know at that time. And so do you have the same challenge, do you not? To trust that the Father's will, the Mother's will, God's will, is your true will. And that is why you say, oh, not my will, in other words, the thinking mind's will, the limited perception will, the false will. Not my will, that small will be done, but thy will, my true will, be done. And that can indeed include what you would call crucifixion. And the world is going through a bit of crucifixion now, is it not, with this virus, the coronavirus. It is a bit like the crown of thorns, the corona. It is generated by fear. It is generated by the desire to pull back from the light that is entering this world, a defense against the truth. Because what is entering, the light that is entering, is so profound that it is altering and shaking things up. And those who are dedicated to fear and have not found their faith in love are particularly being challenged by this. There are also many who are stepping forward in love to create the illustration by being the ones who pass from this virus. So it is not, you cannot judge, oh, this one is sick because of the unloving thoughts. That is not true. You cannot know that. But as a whole, in its experience of this, humanity is having the experience of resisting the entering of light. But we would say birthing the entering of light. And there is resistance in the body of the woman when the child is coming. Yes, it needs to accommodate to the act. And that could be interpreted as pain and suffering and dis-ease, lack of ease. But the lack of ease is lessened when the focus becomes on the birth of new light, the birth of the new child. And so it was for me on the cross. As the situation progressed, my mind was directed first, of course, towards all of these sensations occurring, and the fear of the crowd, and my human suffering at losing my connection with my human family and my loved ones. And I felt the pain of the body. But as time went by and I learned to breathe and to be present with what was occurring and to love what was occurring, I started increasingly focusing upon the light that was being birthed and that would later be represented in the new body that I would represent to the world. The new light, the light of Christ, implanting itself, impregnating itself in the shared consciousness, a star in the sky where there had been only darkness before. And from that point onwards, you have always had the choice to look upon the star and to relate to it, to identify with it as what you are as well. I went through a certain event called the crucifixion. Many have been through worse things in terms of the pain to the body. And many have gone through, everyone goes through in this world some form of what you would call crucifixion. The message of this sharing is that when you are there, it seems very real, for a time at least, until you can adjust to it, breathe with it, love it. And this is the message, breathe with and love your crucifixion. That it become transformed into the new birth for which it is designed as a function of your holy will, as the event 2,000 years ago was a function of my holy will in communion with and surrender to God's holy will. In the same way, whatever crucifixion you might be facing at this time is likewise aligned. within you, there is a desire to accommodate that new light shall be birthed. The new compassion growing out of the sense of oneness of humanity struggling with this together, the World War III as we have called it. But it is one that can be fought inside and together. Loving one another, having compassion for one another. And I will say that it is the compassion for one another and the love for your brothers and sisters that will see you through the most difficult times. And so as the wind whips around and the snow and the hail comes down with what was a sunny day just a few minutes ago, I am reminded of that day, for something quite similar happened in those times. The skies grew dark and rain came and the cold. And in Israel it is a blessing, the rain. And indeed it was a blessed event. And as I transitioned through these hours, joy increasingly made a home in my being. And I was radiating with joy by the end of it, as it were. And then a little ripple at the end. A final spasm of humanity wishing to hold on as it witnessed all these things going away. Father, why hast thou forsaken me? Just venting for a minute. And then the return to joy. And it was from that place that I willingly and gently released the body and began a transition into the incarnation of something which would reflect for you and to those that I visited in those times and after your Easter morning, on and after your Easter morning. I celebrated the fulfillment of a plan that had been hatched thousands of years prior to bring the remembrance to you and to humanity, and even now, as this occurs thousands of years later, that only love is real. And as you embrace it and love all events, love, the power of love, permeates your human experience and transforms it into light. So on this Good Friday, I ask that if you join with me in my suffering and reflect upon the darkness of that day, understand that as you go into the darkness, the purpose of darkness, of going into the darkness, is to bring your love there, that it might be healed. Just as I chose to incarnate in that life as the one you know as Jesus, into the darkness of the consciousness of humanity, so that I might, in my own way, surrender to the Father and allow the Father to bring forth an illustration of light in the darkness. You are not alone. I love you and am with you, and I invite you to follow me into the joy and the glory of resurrection by embracing and truly loving your enemies, whether they seem to be without or within, or a situation. Engage fully with it. Ask yourself the question, how might this be an act of love, that I might grow and birth something new? And once my resistance ends to its presence, and I engage and embrace it, then and only then can true healing come and the disease be replaced by glory, the glory of the light of Christ. I send you my love and my gratitude for your existence, the shining light that you are. And with that, we conclude this sharing on this Good Friday. Amen.